The premium cabin of Flight 642 glowed with a warm golden hue as the Airbus A350 prepared for its long overnight journey from Chicago to Paris. Crystal glasses reflected the fading sunlight streaming through oval windows, while passengers in tailored attire sank into spacious leather seats. Among them, Clara Winslow adjusted the folds of her emerald green dress and hid a smirk as she observed a tall man awkwardly managing a bulky carry-on while balancing a bright purple backpack covered with cartoon stars. Her manicured nails tapped rhythmically on the armrest as she watched him wrestle with a child's car seat in a narrow aisle. Daniel Mercer felt every pair of eyes in the premium cabin following him as he struggled with the safety harness for his 7-year-old daughter, Ella. At 37, he stood just over 6 feet tall, his build still bearing the disciplined strength of his years in the Air Force, even though he had left the military 4 years earlier. His short, dark hair was cut with the same precision as always, a habit he never abandoned, and the sharp blue of his eyes now held a gentler focus, checking every detail to ensure his daughter's comfort. Ella, her curls brushing against the window as she leaned forward, squealed with excitement at the sight of baggage carts and fuel trucks outside. She held tightly to her sketchbook filled with drawings of airplanes, each page labeled in shaky handwriting with terms her father had taught her: wingspan, landing gear, fuselage. At just 7 years old, she had turned their small apartment into a miniature aviation museum with model planes she and Daniel built on weekends. Clara Winslow studied this quiet domestic moment with the calculating gaze of someone who had made an art out of assessing people's value. At 35, she was a self-made CEO of a cybersecurity firm that had skyrocketed from a basement startup to a billion-dollar empire. With her trademark blonde bob and sharp business attire, she had become a regular face on magazine covers and financial news shows. But beneath her polished success was the shadow of betrayal, partners who had burned her, rivals who had mocked her, leaving her quick to judge, slow to trust. In the cockpit, Captain Thomas Avery conducted his pre-flight routine with the ease of 25 years in the skies. At 46, his weathered hands moved across the control panels with automatic precision, each switch and lever part of a language he spoke fluently. He had lived through near misses, emergency diversions, and storms that tested his patience, yet he remained unshaken, earning the reputation of a captain who never lost his composure. Beside him, First Officer Marcus Lane, 39, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Though he had recently celebrated his promotion after 16 years with the airline, he had admitted before boarding that something he ate at the terminal wasn't sitting right. He brushed it off as indigestion, but Captain Avery noticed his pale complexion as they prepared for departure. In the cabin, Maya Torres, the lead flight attendant, moved with graceful efficiency. At 31, she knew instinctively which passengers would need reassurance and which would need reining in. Already, she had spotted tension between the sharp-dressed Clara and the struggling father with the unicorn backpack. Clara's voice rose just enough to be overheard. Premium seats aren't really for everyone, are they? Some people should probably reconsider before splurging. Her remark drew quiet chuckles from a banker nearby, who quickly returned to his newspaper. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He had heard variations of those words too many times before. In grocery stores, at school events, among parents who drove imported cars while he drove his aging truck. Each time, he remembered the promise he had made to his late wife, Emily, on her hospital bed: never let pride or anger come before Ella's happiness. Daniel had traded flight suits for a maintenance engineer's overalls, taking a job that paid far less but allowed him to be home each night to read bedtime stories. "Daddy, why are they laughing?" Ella whispered, slipping her small hand into his. He crouched to meet her gaze, his voice calm and soft, the same tone he had used when explaining why Mommy couldn't come back from heaven. "Don't worry about them, sweetheart. Some people just make noise. We're right where we belong." She smiled faintly, clutching her sketchbook as he pulled out her favorite story about a little airplane that flew higher than all the others because it had the biggest heart. Emily used to read it, and now it had become their nightly ritual. Clara watched this exchange with a mixture of satisfaction, something unfamiliar. She was used to seeing weakness in people, to spotting flaws she could use. But something in the father's quiet strength unsettled her. The engines roared to life as the plane pushed back from the gate, climbing steadily into the fading evening sky. Ella giggled as Daniel turned the safety demonstration into a game, mimicking oxygen masks and life vests until she laughed so hard she covered her mouth with both hands. At 35,000 feet over the Atlantic, the first tremor hit. Not the soft turbulence of a casual bump, but a violent shudder that rattled overhead bins and spilled drinks across trays. The cabin lights flickered, shadows dancing across frightened faces, and then came the acrid stench of burning electrical systems. In the cockpit, warning lights blazed red. First Officer Marcus Lane's face turned from pale to ashen. Sweat dripped down his temple as he fought to keep his eyes open, hands trembling over the controls. Captain Avery shot him a sharp glance. "Marcus, you all right?" Before Lane could respond, his body stiffened, then slumped forward against his harness. His shallow breathing and gray skin left no doubt he was incapacitated. The captain immediately took control, radioing for help while stabilizing the plane that had begun to tilt dangerously. Passengers screamed as the aircraft jolted again, one engine coughing and stuttering. Clara's glass shattered on the floor, champagne spreading across the carpet as the jet dropped several hundred feet before Captain Avery pulled it back. Then came his voice, crackling through the intercom, urgent but steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are experiencing technical difficulties. If there are any licensed or former pilots on board, military or civilian, please make yourselves known to the crew immediately." The cabin fell into stunned silence, broken only by sobs and the unsettling whine of the failing engine. Maya Torres scanned the passengers, her eyes locking on Daniel Mercer as if she knew before he even stood. Inside, Daniel's promise to Emily clashed with the truth he could no longer ignore. The aircraft was in crisis. His daughter was aboard. And the world no longer needed him to stay hidden. It needed him to fly. Daniel's hand slipped into his jacket pocket, fingers brushing against the worn leather wallet. Behind his driver's license was a card he hadn't shown anyone in years, his old military ID. The photograph showed a younger man with sharper features, clean-shaven and stern, a fighter pilot who once navigated combat skies. Ella tugged at his hand as the plane jolted again, her voice trembling yet steady. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" Daniel kissed the crown of her curls, breathing in the faint scent of strawberry shampoo. Then he stood, his movement drawing the eyes of every passenger. He handed his ID to Maya Torres, who read the credentials with widening eyes. "That's my daddy," Ella whispered proudly to no one in particular, her chin lifted. "He flew the fastest planes. He can fly anything." Clara Winslow, who dismissed him as an awkward misfit, stared at the transformation. The worn jacket suddenly looked like military issue. The precision of his stride through the aisle was not clumsiness. It was discipline. Her earlier judgments coiled into a knot of shame she didn't want to examine. Daniel stepped into the cockpit where Captain Avery gripped the controls, sweat glistening on his brow as the aircraft groaned against the storm. Marcus Lane lay unconscious in his seat, his chest rising shallowly. Warning lights screamed across the panels, hydraulic failures, overheating engines, flickering navigation systems. Daniel slid into the jump seat. His voice was calm, practiced. "Daniel Mercer, former Air Force. Over 2,500 combat hours, another 1,000 in transport and training aircraft. Tell me what you need, Captain." Avery didn't waste time with questions. "First officer is down. We've lost partial hydraulics. Engine 2's unstable. Storm dead ahead. I need comms and systems." "Copy that," Daniel said, donning the spare headset. His fingers moved across unfamiliar panels with the instinct of someone who had spent years adapting to crises. "Give me 30 seconds to map your layout. Then I'm yours." While Avery flew, Daniel worked the radios, calling in the emergency. "Paris Control, this is Flight 642, declaring Mayday. We've got partial system failure, one incapacitated pilot, 210 souls aboard. Request immediate vectors to nearest diversion." The storm hit like a fist. Rain hammered the windshield, lightning split the night into blinding white flashes, and the aircraft bucked violently. In the cabin, screams filled the air. Laptops crashed to the floor. Clara clutched her armrest, for once stripped of every layer of composure, her nails digging into the leather. Ella sat with remarkable calm for a child. She opened her sketchbook, continuing to color a jet fighter, whispering, "Daddy said when planes are scared, you just keep flying." When the passenger beside her began hyperventilating, she handed him a stick of gum from her backpack. "Chew this. Daddy says it helps with nerves too." In the cockpit, Daniel's voice cut through chaos with military precision. "Altitude 33,000, holding. Engine 2 temperature dropping into yellow. Hydraulics fluctuating 40 to 60%. We need descent soon or we risk total loss. Nearest field is Shannon, Ireland, Avery confirmed. 90 minutes out in good conditions. Tonight isn't good conditions. Together, they began the descent. Each violent jolt tested Avery's grip and Daniel's focus, but their rhythm grew seamless. Avery flying, Daniel monitoring systems and communicating with air traffic control. 3,000 feet, glide slope captured. Speed 145 knots. Pressure steady at 55%. Daniel called out as they broke through heavy clouds. The runway lights of Shannon shimmered through the rain. The first approach was aborted. Crosswind shoved the plane sideways just before touchdown. Engines roared as Avery powered them back into clouds. Passengers screamed, some praying aloud, some clinging to strangers. Clara found herself whispering words she hadn't spoken since childhood. Please, please let us land. Ella, clutching her sketchbook, murmured, It's okay. Daddy promised Mommy he'd keep me safe. He always does. The second attempt began. Daniel's steady cadence filled the cockpit. Stabilized approach. 1,000 feet. Runway in sight. Crosswind 15 knots, within limits. 500 feet. Approaching minimums. Speed 142. Holding centerline. The wheels struck hard, bouncing once before settling. Reverse thrusters screamed as the plane hurtled down the slick runway, slowing, until finally grinding to a stop with fire trucks rushing alongside. The cabin erupted. Applause, sobs, people embracing strangers. Maya Torres, tears finally breaking her composure, directed the stretcher crew as Marcus Lane was carried out, conscious now, giving a weak thumbs up. Captain Avery shut down the engines and turned to Daniel. He extended his hand, his voice thick with gratitude. You saved us all. That was some of the finest flying I've ever seen. Daniel shook his head. Just did what had to be done. Any pilot would have done the same. But both men knew that wasn't true. When Daniel emerged from the cockpit, the premium cabin went silent. The same passengers who had smirked at him earlier now looked with awe. Ella flew into his arms, whispering, I knew you'd save us, Daddy. Clara stood in the aisle, her hair undone, makeup streaked by tears. The sharp edge in her voice was gone. Wait, she said softly. I owe you my life and an apology. Daniel shifted Ella in his arms, steady eyes meeting hers. You don't owe me anything. I'm just an engineer who knows a bit about planes. I did it for her. The simplicity of his answer hit Clara harder than any scolding could. For years, she had measured worth by status and wealth. This man, who owned none of it, had just redefined value before her eyes. Ella tugged on Clara's sleeve. You can have dinner with us. Daddy makes spaghetti. Mommy always said there's room for one more friend at the table. Daniel hesitated, but Clara's eyes betrayed a loneliness he recognized. Emily would have welcomed her. He nodded. There's a small diner near the airport. Nothing fancy, but good food. That night, under fluorescent lights and with paper napkins, the three of them shared a meal. Ella explained aerodynamics using French fries, while Daniel told stories, carefully edited, of Air Force days. He spoke of Emily with warmth instead of grief, remembering the woman who insisted he didn't have to live every day like a mission. Clara laughed genuinely for the first time in years. She ignored buzzing messages from her team in Paris, reporters demanding comment, her assistant listing urgent decisions. None of it mattered compared to the warmth at that table. Later, as Daniel carried a sleeping Ella to the shuttle, Clara whispered, Thank you, not just for saving us, but for showing me what courage looks like. It isn't power. It's love. Daniel smiled faintly. Everyone's fighting something. The lucky ones have someone worth fighting for. Months later, Clara still carried the memory. She reshaped her company, creating family support programs and a foundation for single parents. On her desk sat a photo from the news, a grainy image of Daniel carrying Ella off the runway. A reminder that strength wasn't about dominance, but responsibility. And when she received a hand-drawn invitation from Ella, letters uneven but cheerful, to her school play, Clara booked a coach seat for the first time in a decade. She sat in a crowded auditorium, watching Ella play the part of a brave little airplane who flew not with wings, but with heart. As parents gathered for cookies afterward, Ella introduced Clara as the Lady Daddy helped find her heart. Daniel tried to apologize for the bluntness, but Clara only smiled. Children saw truths adults hid. Flight 642's emergency landing would become just a footnote in aviation manuals. But for those aboard, it was the day quiet courage revealed itself in the most unexpected place. A single father in worn clothes, carrying a purple backpack, choosing love over fear. And sometimes, that's the only kind of hero the world really needs.